year is 1980, and you will kneel before Zod. Superman 2 coming up.
It's Superman's home.
My son, the time has come to tell you of the darkest episode in Krypton history.
Think of it. 3. Count them, 3 supervillains. Each one with the same power he has.
They do not know what could be done if they were to escape. On Krypton, these villains were uncontrollable. On Earth, each of them would have the identical powers that you have.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Random Rewatch. This is Mike, your host, and we are taking on 1980s film Superman 2. So as we talked about when we did Superman, these two films were filmed, I want to say back to back, but it was really simultaneously. Richard Donner, who was the director of Superman, was also filming Superman 2, and he was going back and forth between the two films. So they started filming in May 1977. They finished up filming in October 1978. By that time, about 75% of Superman 2 had also been filmed. So the producers of both the films were Alexander Salkind and his son Ilya, and they were not getting along with Richard Donner to the point where they had to bring in an intermediary. And so they brought in another director, a guy named Richard Lester, and Lester would go back and forth between the Salkinds and Donner, and it was literally one of these things like, tell Richard that we need to do this, or tell Alexander that we need to do this. It was just, had to be absolutely ridiculous. Donner says that he got along fine with the Salkinds and that it was Pierre Spengler, who was the other producer, that he didn't get along with. But all the stories are that it was the Salkinds that Donner could not get along with. So Lester was brought in. He was basically the second unit director. And if you don't know what that is, the second unit director is the guy or woman who directs the scenes that do not have like the stars in them. So, you know, the scenes of like people on the street looking up, or stunt work, establishing shots, crowd work, anything that doesn't have really the principles in it is done by the second unit director. And that's generally an entirely different film crew from the first unit. So they're chugging along in 1977, and by the end of the year, actually probably by like October, like Gene Hackman, Ned Beatty, Valerie Perrine, they had finished up their shots, and tensions were just building between, let's say, the producers and Richard Donner. And at one point, the Salkinds just said, look, we just need to focus on the first film because the first film has to get released in the end of 1978. And so about a year before that film's release, they basically pulled Donner off any additional work with Superman 2 and had him just focus on doing Superman. But at that point, about 75% of the film had been shot. So in December 1978, Superman is released. And by January 1979, the whole thing is just gone to hell. One of the big sticking points is that the Salkinds had decided that they wanted to cut all of Marlon Brando's scenes out of the second film because they did not want to pay Marlon Brando the back end that his contract called for. So he was supposed to get almost 12% of receipts for the second film, and they didn't want to pay him that. So they made the decision that they wanted to cut all that out. And of course, that threw Donner off the deep end, and he was basically going around saying, look, I make the film my way or I don't make the film at all. So this went on for a while, and during January, February, the Salkinds were apparently talking to other directors. They really wanted Guy Hamilton to step in. He had done 4 of the James Bond films, but he was not available. Lester was in Spain shooting a film called Cuba with Sean Connery, so he wasn't immediately available. And so it went on for a little bit, but by March, the Salkinds had decided that, look, we're just gonna kick Donner to the curb, and we're just gonna move forward. And by the middle of March, Lester had finished up his assignment in Spain, and he was available to shoot the rest of Superman 2. The battle was really over Spengler, who Donner absolutely refused to work with. So they fired him by telegram, which was the 1979 equivalent of sending him a text. He never spoke to them, and as of a recent interview, he hadn't spoken to them since. So Richard Lester and Richard Donner have very different filmmaking styles. Donner is very much about kind of epic storytelling, and Lester is not. And he's kind of more campy, silly, kind of really wants to make it feel like a comic book, more or less. And so the original cinematographer who had shot Superman, Jeffrey Unsworth, he had passed away before the film was released. And so Lester brought in a cinematographer named Robert Painter to shoot the remainder of the film. And so his color palette was a lot kind of brighter and a lot more kind of garish colors, vivid colors, to make it look more like it was, a comic book. So they kind of rewrote the beginning, they rewrote the ending to fit more with Lester's style of filmmaking and storytelling. There's a whole beginning sequence in Paris with the terrorists attacking the Eiffel Tower with a nuclear bomb. That was all brought in. The whole delay caused Christopher Reeve to become unavailable. His contract to do the two films had expired, and he had gone off to do another film. So he was off shooting. He had just begun, or was just about to begin, shooting another film when the Salkinds called him or telegraphed him and said, you have to show up to do Superman 2. So they had to renegotiate Reeves' contract. One of the things that he demanded in renegotiation was more control, more artistic control, more of a say in the story. He didn't really trust Richard Lester. You're going to find a lot of these people were really loyal to Richard Donner. They originally wanted Tom Mankiewicz to come in and do rewrites on it like he had done with the first film. He refused to do it out of loyalty. Gene Hackman, they wanted Gene Hackman to come in and shoot new scenes, and he didn't want to do it. He refused to do it because of his loyalty to Richard Donner. You're going to see a lot of that in the production of the remainder of this film. People who were involved in the first film did not want to be involved in the second film once Donner got fired. They brought in Susanna York, who was Kal-El's mother in the first film, and they had her basically reshoot the Marlon Brando scenes because she was cheaper and she wasn't getting a back end. They could just pay her rate, and that was all there was to it. Richard Lester, one of the differences between him and Donner was that he shot with a 3-camera setup, which is kind of more of a television setup. Films, especially in that era, films are generally filmed with a single camera so that everybody knows where the point of view is. And it's also cheaper because if you have three cameras running film, then it becomes very expensive, especially because you're not clearly going to be using the film from all 3 cameras. It's popular in television at the time because the television cameras are shooting the video, but it does give a lot of flexibility in terms of editing and in terms of blocking, because now you have multiple points of view that you can go to, and it's easier to get your coverage. So for instance, with a single camera setup, if you are filming a conversation, right, you have to shoot one guy and an over the shoulder for the second guy, and then you have to come around, set up the entirely different way, and then shoot the second guy over the shoulder of the first guy. And then you probably also have to do a master shot, which is the 2 of them. So you have to do 3 different setups and then multiple takes of 3 different setups. Whereas in a multi-camera, you could set up all of those setups at the same time and just have them riff through and do takes. So it makes it faster, but for some actors who are used to a traditional single camera setup, it makes it difficult for them to really know like where to direct their performance at. And you have to remember that this is the point in time where there were like film actors and there were television actors, and you didn't really, not like you have today where you have this big film actor and now he's going to be doing a television series and then he's going to go back and do a movie, or they're shooting these big prestige television series like Game of Thrones. They're basically shooting them like they were movies. There's a lot more blending and overlap between the skills of people who are in television and people who are in acting in films. Whereas in the 70s, there was a pretty, delineated line between film actors and television actors, and film actors did not come to do television, and it was pretty rare for a television actor to be a significant role in a film unless they were like making the jump into films. They brought John Williams back to do the score for the second film. He did not get along with Richard Lester. Him and Lester were getting in arguments quite a bit, and Williams basically refused to work with Lester, and so he walked away from the project, and they brought in another composer by the name of Ken Thorne to score the sequel. So what Lester had to film was basically a new beginning, a new ending to the film. They had to shoot the scene in, East Houston or West Houston, the small town where Zod and the others come down to Earth. There's a lot of Donner's scenes that were filmed during his time that were in the film, in addition to the Lester stuff. The big battle at the end was largely unfilmed. Some of the Niagara Falls stuff had not been filmed yet. So Lester kind of worked around with some of that stuff. So the film was released in December of 1980 in Australia. It was released in April of 1981 in the United Kingdom and June of 1981 in the United States. Now, if you listen to this podcast, you may be wondering why I'm talking about that at the top. And the reason is because in 2001, when they were putting together stuff for the DVD, there came like this call from fans to see some of the stuff that had been cut out of the film by Lester and by the Salkinds that Donner had shot. And basically there became a big groundswell of support for what would be known as the Richard Donner cut. So if you're sitting here thinking like the Zack Snyder thing with Justice League was unique or the first of its kind, it definitely was not. The Richard Donner cut is the OG of fan-driven director's cuts. Now, obviously, there have been director's cuts of a lot of movies. There's like 5 different cuts of Blade Runner. I mean, Lucas did the special editions with the first 3 Star Wars movies. I mean, there's always been director's cuts in a lot of cases. But the groundswell from people in the industry and fans to see kind of a restored Richard Donner version of the film was really gaining a lot of momentum in the early 2000s. Also, right about the same time, they found a huge amount of original footage in a vault or a storeroom. I guess it was a vault in England that was stuff that Donner had shot that no one had really ever seen. And by some reports, it was almost 6 tons of film. Warner Brothers approached Richard Donner in May of 2001 and asked him if he would be interested in doing a director's cut and re-editing the film and putting in anything he wanted to, and Donner originally turned them down. Margot Kidder was talking about how there was an entire other movie that no one had ever seen. By that time, Christopher Reeve had been injured. In 1995, he was thrown off a horse during an equestrian event, shattered 2 vertebrae, so he was he had honestly always been in bad health, but he was in obviously very terrible health by this point. There were a lot of legal issues between who had rights and who owned the film, who owned the scenes. There was a lot of stuff to sort out. And there was still the question of all the footage that Brando had shot. How was he going to get paid? And then Marlon Brando passes away in 2004. Everything is still unresolved. And Warner Brothers in 2005 began starting to put the project together without the help of Richard Donner. Michael Thau, who was editing it, was trying to put it together in a way that he thought Richard Donner would have shot it. Although even Donner was saying that the footage that he saw from the original shoot was stuff that he would never do now in 2005. So he was having a hard time even wrapping his head around it. But by mid-2006, Donner was getting more and more involved with the project and eventually wound up kind of getting fully invested in it. So the Richard Donner cut winds up being film shot by 2 directors, cut by 3 different editors, and is kind of a glorious mess. And so we are going to be looking on the scene by scene as I recap the film. We are actually going to be looking at the Richard Donner cut, and I will make kind of reference to the Richard Lester version when it's appropriate. So less than 20% of the film, the Richard Donner version of the film, is scenes shot by Richard Lester, because mainly the final battle scene and the scene in the small town, those hadn't been shot in any form, so they needed those in the film. So let's get into Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut. So in this opening, we see Marlon Brando, and we see the trial of General Zod. General Zod is played by Terrence Stamp. Terrence Stamp, at this point, not very well known to American audiences. You also have Ursa, played by Sarah Douglas, another British actor who had only been in a couple of films at that point. And Nan is played by Jack O'Halloran, who is an American professional boxer, or a retired American professional boxer. Fought Cut Norton, fought George Foreman. 57 professional bouts. Also did some acting, did some stunt work. Doesn't have a lot to say in this movie. Is a lot more of a character in the Richard Donner version of the movie than he is in the Lester version. In the Lester version, he basically just grunts a few times and acts stupid. He does a lot of that in this version, but he seems to have a little more going on. So anyway, there's some kind of trial, and Jor-El, played by Marlon Brando, is prosecuting, for lack of a better word. He is accusing Zod of some kind of rebellion and is in front of the ruling council of Krypton, as he calls it, and is going over what Zod is accused of doing.
Finally, General Zod, chief architect of this intended revolution and author of this insidious plot to establish a new order amongst us, with himself as absolute ruler. The decision of the council will now be heard. Guilty. Guilty.
So Zod, after Zod and his others are found guilty, he proceeds to threaten them and to threaten Jor-El, which is a motif that we will see throughout the film.
You will bow down before me, Jor-El. I swear it. No matter that it takes an eternity, you will bow down before me. Both you, and then one day,
It's kind of reminiscent of, the scene in Man of Steel where Zod, played by Michael Shannon, is put on trial.
I will reclaim what you have taken from us. I will find him. I will find him, Lara. I will find him!
So Zod and Ursa and Nan are put into the Phantom Zone, which is a really cool effect. Kind of this mirrored thing that flies down out of space, lands on top of them, I guess sucks them up, and now they're flying off into space. And we get a replay of the end of the first Superman movie. So in this film, instead of there being a nuclear bomb in Paris and Superman throws the nuclear bomb up into space and it explodes and releases Zod and the others, this is the missiles that Lex Luthor launched at California one of which he throws up into space. And I like that better because it works out that in this case, this film winds up being a direct result of the events of the first film. Had Superman not thrown Lex Luthor's rocket up into space, then Zod would not have been released. How Zod wound up near Earth, I guess that's still a question. Maybe he got sucked into the warp that the spaceship that Kal-El was on was, and he just has been floating around for 30 years in orbit of Earth. In any case, his release is, like I said, a direct result of the events of the first movie. And I think that works out a lot better than, oh, we're going to have some random terrorist in France and Superman's going to wind up doing the same thing. So I got to say that the whole release and the flying scenes, the way that they fly is absolutely ridiculous. So now we cut back to the Daily Planet. Lois notices that Clark is never around when Superman is around. So in this version of the film, she's a lot smarter about putting together the idea that Clark Kent is Superman. You know, you see her sketching in a book, drawing like the glasses and the hat on a picture of Superman and starting to put it all together. It isn't until much later in the film, in the theatrical version, that it finally comes to her who Superman really is.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And there's Mr. Kemp. Bet you he wishes he'd been around when it all happened.
Clark, he's never around when Superman's here.
Poor guy.
So she jumps out the window and like dares Superman to save her.
Tall, broad shoulders, dark hair.
Gotta give you credit, you really had me fooled. And I'm nobody's fool. Superman.
Superman. You mean, you think I'm Superman?
So Clark kind of saves her without showing himself off as Superman and kind of makes her feel a little bit foolish. We have the scene on the moon where there are astronauts on the moon, and Zod and Ursa and Nan show up and cause some havoc there, and then they overhear something on the radio and they decide that they're going to go to planet Houston.
The closer we come to an atmosphere with only one sun, a yellow sun, the more our molecular density gives us unlimited powers.
They come from there, a place called Houston.
Then we will go there too, to rule. Finally, to rule.
We cut to a prison scene. We see Otis, we see Lex, and they are trying to escape. Otis gets caught. Lex climbs up a ladder that's attached to a balloon where Miss Tessmacher, played by Valerie Perrine, is in the balloon. They find the Fortress of Solitude and are able to find the crystals and activate them. And we have Marlon Brando's recordings that he had filmed. And Lex finds out about Zod and decides that it might be a good idea if Zod were to escape.
3 supervillains, all 3 with the same power he has. All 3 totally dedicated to corruption, violence, evil. They need a contact on Earth. Someone who felt the same as they did. Someone who had the same wonderful contempt for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Meanwhile, Clark and Lois have gone to Niagara Falls, posing as honeymooners, doing some kind of investigative report. A boy falls over the falls. Clark's not there, but he sees it, becomes Superman, and saves the boy. Lois again notices that Superman's there, Clark's not there. And we come to the weirdest scene in the entire movie, which is this hotel room scene. If you're watching it and you look at it, you notice that Christopher Reeve looks very different. His hair's different. He's physically smaller. He's got these weird round glasses on. The reason is because this is test footage. They had never shot this scene. It was one of the scenes that had gotten kind of cut when they started focusing on finishing the first film, and they hadn't gotten around to shooting it. And obviously by this point, when they're assembling this, it's not like they can go back and reshoot it. Christopher Reeve is in a wheelchair at this point. In any case, he is 15 years older. Margot Kidder's 15 years older. There's no way they could have reshot this. But they wanted it in the film. So they just took test footage and they dropped it in. And it looks awful. And if you don't know that and you're watching it, you're sitting there going, what is going on? Why is Clark wearing those glasses? And what happened to his hair? Because it's really just Christopher Reeve's screen test. Lois pulls a gun on him, literally, and tries to shoot him and basically outs him.
With thousands of children potentially falling off something lethal all around the world, would Superman be in Niagara Falls today? Why wouldn't he be in the Grand Canyon?
Why don't you ask the child's family? I'm sure they would know.
And why is it always when I'm with you until Superman appears? And then you seem to disappear.
Well,
very conveniently, it seems to me.
For hot dogs, for Pete's sake, you're the one.
And when Superman appeared, I looked over at that hot dog stand and you were gone. You weren't there.
I was...
Nowhere.
I can't help it if I had to go to the...
You are Superman.
And of course, she tricks him because there were no bullets in the gun in the first place. So he takes Lois to the Fortress of Solitude, where he decides that the only way that he can be with her is if he gives up his powers. The ghost of his father, the recording of his father, tries to talk him out of it, but can't. He is insistent on it. And so the machine does a thing, and Clark does not have any superpowers anymore.
If I no longer wish to serve humanity.
Is this how you repay their gratitude? By abandoning the weak, the defenseless, the needy for the sake of your selfish pursuits?
Selfish?
In the meanwhile, Zod and Ursa and Nan have made their way to Washington, and they invade the White House. And there's a whole group of people in the Oval Office, and one of them is pretending to be the president, but Zod's not buying it.
Rise before Zod. No. Kneel before Zod. You are not the president. No one who leads so many could possibly kneel so quickly.
I'm the man they're protecting.
So the actual president comes out from behind the crowd where they've been protecting him. President here played by E.G. Marshall, who had been acting in films since the mid-1940s, often played like a military person or a doctor or a lawyer, played a juror in 12 Angry Men. So we get the kind of famous kneel before Zod moment with the president. Meanwhile, Clark and Lois are at a diner somewhere, I think in Canada. Somebody has told Zod about Superman, and so Zod goes on TV and challenges him to come find him. And Clark sees this and he realizes that he's made a grave mistake, that he needs to go back to the North Pole and try to get his powers back somehow.
Only by strict compliance with all his directions will the lives of innocent millions be spared. Superman, can you hear me? Superman, where?
Who is this Superman?
You'll find out, General. And when you do...
Come to me, Superman. If you dare, I defy you. Come and kneel before Zod.
So we have this moment in the Fortress of Solitude where Jor-El, who I guess it's an AI, right? It's a computer program. He has anticipated that Kal-El would determine that he made a mistake and come back. And so he has a method in place and a plan in place to use the last of the Krypton energy that is stored within that construct to basically imbibe Kal-El with the strength that he needs. I think this is a really good moment because I think the way that it's edited in this film versus the theatrical is it really puts a lot more weight on Kal-El and the decision that he made and the gravity of the choice that he made to give up his powers. And now he's got to come basically crawling back and humble himself and realize that he made this mistake. And there's that line again about the son becomes the father becomes the son.
The Kryptonian prophecy will be at last fulfilled. The son becomes the father becomes the son. Farewell forever, Kal-El.
And there's a lot of flashy lights and there's a lot of effects, but we're not really sure what's going on there. Meanwhile, Lex Luthor shows up at the White House. I guess none of the guards are there anymore. So he makes a deal with Zod that he's going to give him the son of Jor-El.
You cannot bargain with what you don't have.
Oh, magnificent one. What I am bargaining with is what you do not have. The son of Jor-El.
The son of Jor-El?
I said that, didn't I?
Jor-El, our jailer.
No, Jor-El, the baseball player.
They go to New York, not New York, definitely not New York. It's Metropolis. They go to Metropolis. They go to the Daily Planet. And obviously, Kal-El's not there.
See the White House. They'll be cleaning for months.
Lex Luthor.
Wouldn't you know it?
This is the son of Jor-El.
No, but I'll bet you're a son of a...
Jimmy!
You promised me the son of Jor-El.
Oh, yes, your grace. But, what I've given you is the next best thing. You just hold on that little lady and you'll be along.
And, of course, with Lois's life in danger, Kal-El shows up.
General, haven't you ever heard of freedom of the press?
Superman.
Superman, thank God. I mean, get him!
Come to me, son of Jor-El! Kneel before Zod!
There's a big battle over Metropolis. A lot of fights, a lot of flying around, a lot of quick cuts. And then Superman just basically flies away and heads for the Fortress of Solitude. Zod and the others follow him, and they've got Lois and they've got Lex. There's kind of a showdown there. Zod threatens to kill Lois. Zod basically forces Kal-El to surrender his powers once again.
Your father condemned us to an eternal living death. Your fate will be the same. You will live, Kal-El, forever, as my slave. If not, then others will pay for your obstinate attitude. Innocent people, millions if necessary, beginning with this lowest person.
Don't, Superman, don't!
Stop it!
All right, Todd.
Superman goes back into the box, and the lights are flashy. And if you're sharp-eyed, you will notice that the first time he did it, the red lights were inside the box. This time, the red lights are outside the box. Hint, hint, hint. He comes out. There's another kneel before Zod moment, except this time he has tricked Zod and crushes his hand. So Zod and Ursa and Nan get thrown down a really deep hole. Superman destroys the Fortress of Solitude. Not really sure what happened to Lex, but I'm guessing they brought him back to prison. And he takes Lois back to her apartment, where she has this conversation with him about how she knows that she can never be with him because the world needs him.
No regrets, okay? I did it. I got the man I love to love me. Didn't I?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay then. Those people need you. Do you think I don't understand that?
So in the lesser version, they go back to the Daily Planet and Superman puts like some super memory kiss on her and she forgets everything.
You don't have to worry. Your secret's safe with me.
I know that, Lois.
In this version, he leaves her at her apartment, and then we cut to Perry White, and Perry White is putting toothpaste on his toothbrush, and then we see it's slowing down, and then it starts to go back into the tube, and then we see that Superman is flying around the earth and turning it back and resetting time like he did in the first film. I got to say, I like the Donner film a lot better, but I don't like this moment. And the reason I don't like this moment is because it basically undoes all the stakes of everything that had happened in the film, because Zod goes back into the Phantom Zone. All the damage is just automatically redone, disappeared so that it wasn't even there. So it's basically like nothing in this film that had happened. And if that's the case, if he could do that anytime he wants, then what stakes are there ever going to be in a story? So I don't particularly love this moment. I don't particularly love the forget kiss either. I think it would be more interesting and more compelling if she goes on and just knows she can't be with him, and that's just the way that it is. But that's the way that they did it, and then they have the scene the next day in the Daily Planet, and it's kind of like this deja vu moment. Like, oh, do I know something happened?
Did you ever feel like you knew something that was so important that...
Whoops.
No, you never did. I mean, I feel like I'm sitting on the single most important story of my career, and I can't remember what it is.
Well, knowing you, it must have been about Superman. Maybe how he saved the city or saved the world.
That's the end of the movie. There's a bit of a coda. So there was a sequence in the diner earlier where there was like this bully truck driver who had beat up Clark when he didn't have his superpowers. And so Clark goes back to the diner and, teaches this guy a lesson. I never liked this moment. This is in the lesser cut too. I just don't see Kal-El doing this. Petty revenge. That's really not his style. I just thought this was a dumb moment, and I thought it was a dumb moment in both the films. So that's the end of the film. So let's just summarize what the differences are in the two versions. So in the Richard Donner version, there's much less comedy. There's a lot of one-liners. I mean, there's still some jokes in this film, in the Donner cut, but nowhere near the campiness that's in the Lester cut. There's a lot more Lex in this, which is good. That's a positive. 2 positives so far. Less comedy, more Lex. Anytime you can give me more Gene Hackman just going off the rails, I'm 100% for it. The escape from the Phantom Zone is different. We talked about that. It was the bomb from Paris in the Lester cut, and it's the bomb from Lex Luthor's plot in this cut. There's more Non in this film, and he's got more to do. Lois suspects earlier, she's basically from jump. She is suspecting that Clark is Superman. 100% more Marlon Brando. The decision to stop being Superman and to give up his powers has a lot more weight in the Donner cut. It's just kind of something that happens in the Lester cut, but it seems like it's a pretty heavy decision in this one. There's no stupid powers. So in the fight in the Fortress of Solitude in the theatrical version, there's all of a sudden all these powers that Superman has that he never has in any other film. Like he could teleport, he could replicate himself. And the stupidest, most ridiculous one of all is he peels the S off his chest and throws it, and it becomes like this giant blanket that wraps around Non. I don't even know what to say about it. There's no magic kiss, which plus or minus, because like I said, I don't really like the ending of the Donner cut with the reversing time thing. And to be fair, the theatrical version is way more polished. This is put together. There's obviously that big sequence in the middle, which is a screen test. It seems kind of jumpier. There's just not as much kind of cohesion in the Donner cut. It's definitely feels like kind of more of an experimental thing, which is given to the way it was shot. Kind of, I guess, makes sense. And it didn't have the benefit of, being filmed in kind of one piece. There's differences in the color grading and the cinematography throughout various sections. There's differences in both films really about like the way that Christopher Reeve's looks because he had lost some weight and gained some weight. So there's some kind of weird moments there. But all in all, I prefer the Donner cut because I just think it's more serious, and I think it is truer to what the story should be. And I should point out that Superman Returns, which came out in 2006, is a sequel specifically to the Donner cut. So there's Superman 3, there's Superman 4. We are not going to talk about them. I will never talk about them. You should not talk about them. Just pretend they don't exist. So in my mind, the sequence goes Superman, Superman 2, the Donner cut, Superman Returns. That's all one story. And these other things that might have happened in the middle, they didn't happen. So the Donner cut did not have a theatrical opening, obviously. It was a home release only. The original film had an opening weekend of, domestically, so this is June of 1981, 14.1 million, which at the time was the highest opening weekend of a film. It wound up doing $108 million in North America. That's United States and Canada. It wound up doing $108 million internationally for a total of $216 million. It's got an 83 on Rotten Tomatoes. It's got an A+ on CineScore. Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars at the time. Roger said that Clark is disguised not by his glasses, but by his ordinariness. Beneath his meek exterior, of course, is concealed a superhero. And as the movie subtly hints, isn't that the case with all of us? I don't know if I mentioned this during the first film, but I've always found like kind of the interesting thing about Superman is that Clark Kent is his disguise. You know, you have other superheroes like Tony Stark and Iron Man is his persona, or Steve Rogers and Captain America is his persona, or Bruce Wayne and Batman is his persona. But with Superman, he is Kal-El. Clark Kent is his disguise. That's really kind of an interesting turn of events in kind of what is thought to be like a typical superhero trope. I guess the Marvel equivalent to that would be like Thor, right? Thor is Thor and Donald Blake is his disguise. Gene Siskel also really likes Superman 2. And we're talking about the theatrical version and all these reviews. He said it was better than the first film. And arguably, he's right. In fact, not even arguably. I'd say he's right. I'd say both the Lester cut and the Donner cut are better than the original 1978 Superman. Now, there's no theatrical release for the Donner cut. It's certainly sitting at a 90 on Rotten Tomatoes. There's a lot of positive reviews for the Donner cut in the magazines and news outlets of the time. Todd Gilchrist, IGN, said that he gave it a 9 out of 10 and said that is a remarkable artistic achievement. Kenneth Sweeney, an American cinematographer, said that Donner's take on the narrative events of Superman 2 is unusual and fascinating. This version includes a longer prologue, deletes many of Lester's campy sequences, and offers a more consistent balance between adventure and romance. And the Donner cut received a Saturn Award for Best DVD Special Edition Release, as well as a Satellite Award for Best DVD. So there you have it. That is Superman 2, the Richard Donner edition, the Richard Donner cut. And we are going to be doing, I'm going to jump a little bit and do Superman Returns, because I want to kind of compare the two of them and then also kind of get us ready for the Superman movie that's coming up very, very shortly. Hopefully I'll get that one done before the Superman movie drops, which I think I will. I also want to just call out your attention to a new project that Rendell and I are working on. We have started doing, I've been doing videos kind of all along, and typically the videos on our YouTube channel are just video versions of our podcast. You know, they're just a static image, and so you can listen to it on YouTube if that's the way that you want to listen to it. And we do some shorts from time to time, And that's really basically it. We have started putting together a couple of specific for video projects on our YouTube channel. One is up there as of the date of this recording in early June. One of them is currently up, which is our top 10 Star Wars moments. And the way that we did that is each one of us picked 5 moments from live action Star Wars, film and television. And we compiled them into a list of 10 moments. And I think it's a really good video. We are currently working on another project, which is our top 10 multiverse saga moments. And so that one you should be expecting in the next couple of weeks, probably by mid-June. There's a lot of work that goes into those videos. I have to hand it to guys who do them on a regular basis because it's just a ton of work doing all the editing. So I hope that you guys give that a look. So just go on YouTube, search for Movie Punditry Podcast. You can look in the show notes for this episode, wherever you're listening to it. And there'll be a link to the YouTube channel on there as well. So thank you for all of your support. Thank you for listening. We appreciate all of you. And we will be talking to you very soon.